And welcome into episode 7 of this podcast. You may not agree with this,
but
I'm Lowery.
And I'm Eric Thomas.
And we welcome you into this episode 7, as I mentioned, being brought to you by Modley's Plumbing and Heating. You never know when you need a plumber until you actually need one. And the number to call, 304-253-HELP for Modley's. And also Massey Power Sports. And Eric, you know, it's hunting season. You're going to kill you a deer, maybe a bear in your neighborhood, whatever the case may be. You need to haul it out. You need a side-by-side from Massey's to haul whatever animal that you perhaps shoot, whether it's a gun or a bow and arrow, whatever you might use to get that animal out.
Anything. You can get a wild boar, anything, hook it up to and winch it out and haul it out there with your Massey Power Sports.
There you go. Hard to believe it's week number 7, Eric, of the high school football season, and we're going to do a recap as we always do, and we'll start in 4A. And I know that you had mentioned on last week's podcast what a distraction at homecoming is in your household, and we had talked about that prior to recording, but Beckley sure took care of business, and I'm sure they had a festive homecoming dance on Saturday because they took care of Preston on Friday 35-7.
Yeah, it was a great, from what I hear, from my inside source.
From what you hear.
It was a great,
from what you're told.
Great time. A great time. You know, in Maris, all seriousness, you know, when you can get a win, that makes everything better. The band sounds better when the football team's winning, and definitely the dance goes over way better.
Well, through 5 games, and Beckley had a bye week in there, they're now 4-1. And, you know, outside of, you know, the best you could be is 5-0. They had that one slip up, but really, even in that loss, I thought they played well. Overall, this has been a really good 5-game stretch for Beckley.
Well, they've taken care of business. And that's one thing that if you would ask me any difference in this team in years past, you didn't know if they were going to take care of business and had let the teams that they should beat, they've really taken care of handily.
In the game that you and I had, we had Shady at home against Greenbrier East, and it turned out to be a very exciting game. At one point, Greenbrier East got up 34-7, but Shady came roaring back, and not only, Eric, did they recover 1 onside kickoff, they got 2, and it was like back-to-back, and had the ball at the 2-yard line with about 5 minutes to go with a chance to pull within 6, and he just couldn't quite get it done.
Yeah, and it was total excitement in the latter part of the third quarter and the fourth quarter, and Shady came storming back, and that team showed a lot of character and a lot of heart, because not only they were down 34-7 at one time, remember they were just 20-0. I'm pretty sure at halftime.
21-0.
21-0 at halftime. So they went in and regrouped, and they listened to their, you know, Coach Colacerto said you got to go out and show some character and some pride, and they came out and played hard. And you're right, it came down to that fumble at the goal line, and I think if they had gotten that, I think the momentum was all on their side, because Greenbrier East seemed like it was stunned again, like when they lost a big lead and lost the game to Bluefield.
Yeah, and you know, Shady's crowd was into it. Like I said, at one point, 34-7. Hey, we didn't know what kind of game we're having, but Shady came roaring back. And I think even though that was a tough loss, I think Shady will get right on down the road.
Yeah, and the game that we'll talk about later, I guess they have Liberty, another local
That's
team
right.
that we cover this week.
All right, we're going to dip into Class AA, and here was a team, Independence AA, playing into 3A. And at the time when they scheduled this game, Eric, they thought Oak Hill was going to be 4A, and that's still a big bite to go to AAA and 4A. But Independence AA, Oak Hill 3A, and that was a tight game, and it came down to the final possession, and Independence came up 1 point short, losing 21-20.
And you know, and Coach Lilly, hats off to him, because he has a great, you know, kicking team now. So we knew, you and I both looked at each other and said, I guarantee you they went for 2 and had a chance to come back and watch the highlights. And I think it's the correct thing to do, especially on the road, if you can score and steal a victory. But I don't think Independence should hang their head after that loss, because that is a AAA playoff team in Oak Hill.
Well, I do too. I like how Coach Lehigh was aggressive. Hey, you know, we're here, we're on the road, we fought. Like I said, originally they thought Oak Hill was a 4A team. Here we are, a AA team. And maybe I don't think that comes into the play and the decision, but you know, maybe in the back of your mind, like, hey, we're in a chance that we can get this big upset win on the road. We're going for it from the 2-yard line. Yeah,
and plus they had battled back because they seemed to be behind the whole game. And I think I'm not second guessing. A lot of people are going to Monday morning quarterback them, but you know, that's for another day. But I would have gone for it, and it looked like the play was drawn up, was a good play, just a better defensive play. And hats off to Oak Hill for sealing the deal and getting a big stop on the extra point.
Also in Class AA in Raleigh County, Liberty against Westside. And, this game got kind of well. I talked to a couple of Liberty people today, and when we were doing our game, Eric, you gave the score. Westside was ahead 27-22. And then like 15 or 20 minutes later, you gave me the score, and it ended up 61-22. So I talked to some Liberty people today, like, what the heck happened? They said the train definitely went off the tracks.
Yeah.
They had some penalties. As all penalties are, it come at critical times.
Yes.
And a critical turnover. And the one thing that we saw when we have covered Liberty games, other teams have been able to expose them over the top, and they said they got beat bad a couple times over the top.
Yeah, and that's what Westside does, and we've had a chance to do them last year, and their coach is turning them around. I think this is his second year, and he was a great high school quarterback, so they're going to put that pill up in the air, and they'll spread you out and throw over top.
So now we switch gears to this week's game, which is brought to you in part by Modley's Plumbing and Heating. You never know when you need a plumber until you need one. And the number to call is 304-253-HELP. That's like calling the doctor, right? You think you could call 304-253-HELP? Help me, maybe if you need an emergency, but that's what it would be. Modley's, you just need to call help. You don't have to say help me.
And you know what? They're so professional. I had to use them last week myself. Had a little leak, and they came and fixed it up in a couple hours.
And also, we appreciate Massey's Power Sports, also a sponsor of this podcast. And Eric, where you had mentioned that Beckley's taking care of business, they're going to take their 4-1 record on the road. They're going to go against Riverside. And over the last 3 years, they've been opening up with Riverside. And when they changed their schedule, they moved this now back to the middle of the year. But you would think Beckley would be the favorite here. You don't take anything for granted, but a much winnable game. And like I said, figure Beckley would be the favorite.
Yeah, and they have a common opponent, which is Greenbrier East, and that's one of Greenbrier East's 2 victories coming into Friday night.
Right.
They had beat Riverside 24-20 in the opening game. That was their opening game. So, the one thing that Coach Surratt will have to do, and we talk about this a lot, those kids will look and go, hey man, we beat Greenbrier East 38-0, and they just barely lost to
Lost to 24-20.
Yeah, so you got to get out of that mindset because neither one of those games have anything to do with Friday night.
Well, right, and the one thing you've always talked about, and I think everybody knows, defense travels, and that's been as good as Beckley's been. I think they've got a solid kicking game, and they're good on offense, but defense is what they can hang their hat on. And I think especially when you go on the road, I think their defense can carry in this game.
Well, the thing is with their defense, they do a lot of good things. They don't give up. If this can hold true to form the rest of the year, because the back end of their schedule is where they're going to need that defense. But Maris, they don't give up the big play. We used to make a joke, and I'm sorry, we used to do this. When it was 3rd and 18, it was what? It was time for the other team to pick up a big one.
The other team, like in games we've done Beckley over the past, when it's 3rd and 18, the other team would have Beckley right where they won.
Yes, right where they won.
And Oak Hill and Princeton, they were able to come up big on them last year. But
they were.
That is so much has changed with the way that Beckley's playing defense.
Yeah, and I can't say it enough and stress enough. They are good all 3 levels. This Flying Eagle team. Great defensive linemen, linebackers play the run great, and they can drop back in their zones. And it makes it tough for a quarterback if the linebacker gets a great depth. It's hard to complete a pass, and those corners and safeties. I mean, you got, I hate to keep saying his name. I mean, AJ Thomas had another takeaway last week, and Preston Clary. Those guys, they're ball hawks, and they say that they love the celebration. I don't know if you know what they do. If you get a takeaway, they got a big sledgehammer on the sideline, and they like to go swing that sledgehammer.
Well, I'll tell you what, get some takeaways, and boy, I'll tell you what, that's like working in the weight room, getting that big sledgehammer and go to rocking. But Eric, Beckley's playing for a home playoff game, and I'm going by memory here of all the years I covered Beckley. I think I'm right. If Beckley's able to get a home playoff game, it would be their first home playoff game since 2005.
And I think you're right. And we talked about that team that last week, and that was a team that really we thought were going to challenge for the state championship.
Right.
Some things happened, a couple bad breaks, and then you're right. I remember they had all the signs around Beckley. This is Beckley, country, a Flying Eagle country, and the momentum's building for them.
Right. So anyway, we'll see how that works out. We'll take a look at 2 Raleigh County teams. And Eric, the game you and I'll have, it'll be Liberty and Shady, both coming here after a loss. Liberty's 2-4, Shady's 3-2. We'll have that game Friday night on Video Productions. This has always been a good county rivalry, and it's always been very competitive.
Oh, very competitive. You're going to get, when Liberty comes to town, they're really going to play where they don't play Independence, this year. But Shady, they will really battle. And I'm really excited to see this because Liberty's turning some things around. But I think Shady found something last week. They've been airing it out a little bit. I think that they could spread you out. Cal Colasurto was putting the ball on the money. That Nathan Easley made one of the best catches you'll ever see
yes, for the touchdown.
For the Tigers for a touchdown. And Jalen Bailey is a touchdown waiting to happen. I'm telling you, that kid toughed it out. I'm pretty sure if we would talk to Coach Colasurto this week, he's going to say that Jalen Bailey was banged up after the first quarter, but he stayed in. And I think they just have weapons in Ramage.
Evan Ramage,
good running back. So they have the makings of a good team.
Of course, on the flip side, Liberty has Isaac Williams, who's been really good.
Great running back.
And of course, their starting quarterback, the coach's son Jackson Workman. The game we did at Pikeview, he ended up breaking a bone in his leg, so he's out for the season. So they've gone with the backup, but the backup has played well. This ought to be a very interesting game.
It's going to be a very interesting and competitive contest.
One of the other big games I think is going to be very exciting. This is down at West Side. It's Independence coming off that loss 3-2. West Side undefeated, 5-0.
Yeah, but I think West Side might have made a mistake, Maris.
Well,
let me tell you why.
Yeah, you'll have to tell me.
Homecoming.
Well, yeah.
Well, what do you want? You don't want to be. You don't want to schedule some teams. And I know Coach Lilly. They take that to heart. You will schedule me for your homecoming game. My boys are coming ready.
Yeah, so that's a big challenge for Westside, to keep your team focused, but let alone playing Independent should keep them focused.
Yeah.
That should be a really hard-hitting contest. That'll be a really good game.
And that's going to be one that Independence really, really needs because they're scheduled down the stretch, and that's a common double A, both double A. You're going to get some points, and that'll keep them in the range of hosting a playoff game.
Well, you're right for Independence with Mingo Central and Princeton still down on the schedule. This is such a huge game for Independence. Not that it's a big game for Westside, but I think Westside can afford to lose it more than Independence can.
Exactly.
Right now.
Now I think that they know collectively they're fighting for, it's a playoff atmosphere, playoff game for Independence if they want to end up hosting a playoff game.
The next segment, as all of our segments, brought to you by Modley's Plumbing and Heating. You never know when you need a plumber till you need one. 304-253-HELP from Modley's and Massey Power Sports. And Eric, as I started doing this part, when we look at the biggest games around the state in each class, this week more so than the previous weeks, a lot of teams are playing up and down. There are a lot of games within their own class, but the best games seem to be teams out of class. For an example, 4A Parkersburg South 4-1 will play host to undefeated 3A Bridgeport, who is 6-0.
And a lot of people think that this Bridgeport team is one of those crossover teams that could easily play in that 4A.
Well, they were in the big class.
Yeah, but now, just go in there and be competitive, with the top teams in the 4A, and they're going to get a chance to prove it at Parkersburg South.
In fact, last year in the playoffs, they scored 70 points against Princeton and didn't even win.
Did not win and was up. Princeton came back. That was a heck of a contest in that.
Can you imagine
game.
if you were a player getting on the bus saying, "Wow, we just scored 70 points and lost"?
Yeah, that's a tough pill to swallow, right?
Yeah, I don't even think no way I could swallow that.
The only good thing about that is you have players played on both sides because the actual college team, the defense would go, "Hey, we did our job," or the offense would say, "We did our job."
70. You gave up 73. As we look into AAA, Herbert Hoover, and they beat Independence the first game, and I think that's propelled them to where they're at now. They're 5-0. Wayne in AA is 4-1.
Who's on the road there?
It's Herbert Hoover's home game. Wayne 4-1 AA at Herbert Hoover.
So Wayne, and the reason I know anything about Wayne is did a little research on them because Scott played Independence and Wayne had given Scott their only loss at that time. So this Wayne team, they used to be a powerhouse in AA back in the the late 90s, early 2000s. They were they won state championship, and they usually have a good football pedigree.
Yeah, the Pioneers, that's for sure. Here's another good rivalry game. Single A Greenbrier West 4-2 against AA James and Rowe 4-2.
Yeah, this is one of those. I think that those communities are so close. They really get after one another. I don't think there's not a lot of love lost between those two teams, and they've battled in football and in other sports and basketball here recently. It's been I think Greenbrier West in hoops even ended James Monroe's streak.
Yeah.
Like 27 game streak or something.
Right.
Like that.
Here's something when I was doing the research on single A, both of these are single A. Tug Valley at home, they're 5-0 against Riverview, who's 4-1. And of course, Riverview is down in McDowell County. That was Yeager and Big Creek that consolidated. And I don't care where you live at, where your school is, there's no good way to get to Tug Valley.
There's not.
I'm just telling you, in Nugget Talk, I've been there. There's no good way to get there. In this game, the ride itself might get a lot of players' stomach feeling a little.
But I'm going to tell you, they're used to it because I think Riverview, you're coming from Bradshaw area, so they just drive right down the river straight to Tug Valley.
Yeah, instead of driving down the river, they're going to have to maybe get a paddle,
might get a pontoon boat,
or maybe they get one of the Massey Power Sports side by side and just zoom on into the game.
Yeah, that's right. Just get a few of those and roll on in.
All right, this podcast being brought to you by Modley's Plumbing and Heating. You never know when you need a plumber till you need one. 304-253-HELP and Massey Power Sports. And Eric will switch gears to college football. And of course, the West Virginia Mountaineers, for the second straight time now, they've went to Stillwater and beat Oklahoma State. They just didn't beat them. They owned it. In fact, they scored all 5 possessions in the first half, 4 touchdowns and a field goal, and they really didn't have to do much in the second half. They had, 31-7 halftime lead. They ended up winning 38-14.
Yeah, and two things I can touch on when I did a little research on the stats of this game, and I had a chance to tell you, 81 plays West Virginia ran to 45 plays that Oklahoma State ran. So that's doing 2 things. You're getting double the plays, but you're also keeping your defense off the field. And the defense they looked real energized. If the less plays you play, the more you can give. And it was really a real thorough whipping that I didn't see coming. I thought they would sneak out with maybe a field goal win, but it felt good to watch a game that wasn't in doubt.
Yeah, that you knew that when you had the lead, you didn't have to worry about the other team making a strong run, a strong finish to come back and win.
Because there just wasn't enough possessions left in the contest.
And one of the things, everything went good, but there was a scary moment in the first half when Garrett Green got hurt, and I was watching it with you at the time, and at the time it looked like, man, he could have separated his shoulder. They took him out. Remember, they took him to the tent. Didn't know if he would return, but he came back in shortly.
Yeah, well, not only did they take him to the tent, they took him into the locker room. Yeah. He came out feeling good, doing cartwheels. So who knows what happened in the locker room.
West Virginia at home on Saturday night. It's an 8 o'clock game, a late game, and kickoff on Fox. And by West Virginia standard, that is a late game at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, but this is a late game.
And Iowa State, very good, and maybe kind of flying under the radar because until I did the research, I didn't realize they're 5-0.
They're 5-0 since the first time since 1991.
Yeah.
I mean, I was even just fresh out, just a young lad back then, coming out fresh out of high school. But they're not giving up a lot of points, 10.5 points per contest. See, I hadn't had a chance to see their schedule as far as they're out of conference. So, but I think if you're WVU, it's a perfect storm for you. Nope, you're the underdog. You're at home at a night contest, and you're breaking out your Cold Rush uniforms. So, all black, and it's going to be a blackout. And I think now, those West Virginia fans are the best. Last week, Neil Brown was fired. This week,
today they're back on the climb.
They're back on the climb. Trust that climb. So,
yeah.
So we'll see what happens Saturday night.
And here's another thing. You know this better than me. I don't remember recently that there's been too many conference teams, unless it was Oklahoma or Texas, that would be favored in Morgantown. Usually West Virginia is the favorite against conference teams at home.
Well, I can tell you this, the TCU team that went in the national championship game, they were favored by 3 touchdowns. And
beat them at the very end.
Last play of the game.
Yeah, right.
Last play of the game at the very end.
Yeah,
so it's Morgantown's a tough, anybody knows, especially at night, it's a tough place to come and play.
Yeah, the line on that I saw today, Iowa State's a 3-point favorite.
3-point favorite.
So, all right, so we'll switch gears to Marshall. Boy, they got a big win. Their homecoming, a great day in Huntington, and Marshall able to put up 52 on the board as they beat Appalachian State 52-37.
Yeah, and that was a big win for Marshall. Anytime you win on homecoming, that's when most of your people come back. Ex-players and a lot of festivities going on, and they were able to handle business.
And the game really wasn't as close as that score indicates. So Marshall's got a little time off. They don't play Saturday. They play a week from Thursday. They'll play on the 17th of October, and they have to go to Georgia State.
Yes, that's on the road, a night game, right?
Night game Thursday night, October 7th. I believe it's October 17th. I don't have a calendar in front of me, but I do think it's the 17th. Thursday night game. It's on ESPN2. They go to Georgia State.
Yeah, but a lot of momentum, with Marshall right now, and I think it's spilling over from the first half performance against the Ohio State Buckeyes. I mean, you can, those were teachable things. You can tell your team, hey, this is top 1 or 2 teams in the nation by any poll, and you scored on them first. So I think that was a rollover.
Yeah, Marshall's 3-2, Georgia State's 3-2, big conference game.
Yeah, and Georgia State got the better of Marshall last year. Marshall was on the roll and went and they came to Marshall and beat them.
Yeah. All right, Virginia Tech, they flew 3,000 miles. They have to bus from Blacksburg to Roanoke and fly from Roanoke to Palo Alto, California, where Stanford is. And then they said that I heard some of the Virginia Tech said that it was such a tough trip. Now that Stanford is part of the ACC, they had to whip them down like they did, and Virginia Tech pounded Stanford 31-7.
Yeah, and Virginia Tech, they were smarting from that loss where they think they had victory ripped from them at Miami. So that was one of those games where you and I even agree, and I kind of like to you nationally, and they called it a touchdown, and I didn't think it was, but they had called it a touchdown on the field, so they should have stuck with the call.
Yeah, I like how you said it. Even you agreed with me.
Yeah.
Well, usually and I think this is common knowledge for anybody if you watch as much football as you and I do, that whatever they call on the field, unless they can show me evidence that says no, that's not the call, then whatever they call on the field should stand.
And when they say it's indisputable or irrefutable, now you couldn't tell.
You couldn't tell. So
tell.
I thought the call should have stood based on that alone.
Yeah, but Virginia Tech went out there, and I think that Stanford. They took out their frustrations on the old Cardinal out there.
And, Notre Dame against Stanford this weekend, so Notre Dame will send Virginia Tech. So maybe Virginia Tech will soften Stanford up for Notre Dame this weekend.
That's right, but Stanford's going to come ready to play.
Well, Stanford beat Notre Dame in South Bend 2 years ago.
They did.
And led them in the second quarter last year. Marcus Freeman pointed that out in his press conference today. So he's well aware of it. So that takes care of that college part of it. But there are 3 really massive games in college football, and Eric, and I think the biggest one, you would agree, Ohio State and Oregon. And Ohio State's a 3-point favorite on the road. I've watched a little bit more of Ohio State than I have of Oregon. Oregon, I don't know that they're as good as they have been. We'll find out. But I can see why Ohio State's a 3-point favorite.
Yeah, and I think that's actually, I'm no bookie, but I think that's a little low. I think Ohio State will smother Oregon the way they play defense a little bit. It'll be probably closer. I think that's low.
But I guess if everybody starts betting on Ohio State, then the line will start going up.
That's why you got to jump on it now.
That's right. Jump on it now. That's why you got to jump on it now. But another game too, and I think that it's crazy that you talk about Penn State and USC in the same conference, but now that the fact that they are, you get to see a matchup like this, and they will play in the Coliseum Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, and this is one of those games where Penn State fans, they're like, we've seen this story before. They've started 5-0, and I don't know the exact how many years, but
4 years in a row.
So Franklin, this is where Coach Franklin needs to make his hay, because they say we start out 5-0, and then those big games on the horizon. I don't think they have the Buckeyes this year.
They do.
They do. They don't have Michigan.
They don't have Michigan, but they have Ohio State at home.
Right. So you can't look down the road to that. This USC team now that everybody had up on a pedestal, but now we're really starting to see that Michigan's not the team that they were. Okay,
no.
So now that's starting to devalue that USC win. So this is one of those games that USC, if they can come in, they can put themselves back, for a major bowl and maybe possibly the playoffs.
Yeah, Penn State's a 6-point favorite. I think Penn State, the difference in this game will be the line play. I think Penn State will find a way to beat Southern.
Yeah, and there's one thing that I did notice when they played West Virginia. It looked like men playing boys. They have big defensive front and a big offensive line that travels, just like we say defense travels. You can push people around.
Yeah, one other college game to mention, Oklahoma and Texas played in the old Cotton Bowl in Dallas. And, for the last several years, they've always had a noon kickoff. But now, that was when they were in the Big 12. Now they're in the Southeastern Conference, and ABC has the time slot of 3:30. So that'll be a 3:30 in the afternoon game on Saturday. Oklahoma and Texas. That should be a battle.
Is it still called the Red River Shootout?
The Red River Shootout, yes.
Not at high noon now, though.
Not at high noon, at 3:30.
That'll be interesting, and I think Texas will take care of business today.
But in them rivalry games, if you ever had a barking dog, this might be one.
Might be the one. I don't.
If you ever had
the
one.
line, so
Texas is going to be like a 6-7 point favorite.
That maybe
touchdown favorite. That might be a little high.
Yeah.
All right, so now we're going to switch our gears to the National Football League. And, of course, it's brought to you by Modley's Plumbing and Heating, 304-253-HELP, and by Massey's Power Sports. And, Eric, before we talk about anything, we got to talk about Dallas's thrilling victory against Pittsburgh. If you remember in our podcast, I was about to pull the trigger on Dallas being the barking dog, and I didn't, but I still had my barking dog still came through. But what a fantastic finish. And I said before we started recording, in any level, especially in NFL, Very few teams turn the ball over 3 times and still win. Dallas had 3 turnovers and still win the game 20-17.
Yeah, and I was proud when I watched that game. I was, proud of the Cowboys because they get a lot of heat and a lot of press, and they make a lot of those stories too. But no one wanted to say how Dallas did. They were down linemen. They had 3 backup linemen on the field the last drive to win the game. So that's really hard to do, especially against that defensive front of the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I think a lot of those Steeler fans might need to call Modley, for all the crying and the tissues.
Well, they had a leak. They had a leak on their defense.
Leaking everywhere, leaking everywhere. All that crying going on here.
Well, here's a funny thing. I think nobody would have thought that Minnesota would be 5-0, the Washington Commanders would be 4-1, and nobody thought Jacksonville would be 1-4.
Well, you have, and you're correct, but you have a team that played in the Super Bowl in the San Francisco 49ers, who everyone has on a pedestal, and it's not a must-win Thursday when they play the Seattle Seahawks at Seattle, but they're 2-3. It's going to be hard in their division to win their division if they go drop another divisional game.
That's right. Here's another thing too. Dallas will take on the Detroit Lions on Sunday, and it's amazing. Dallas is 3-2, and they're 3-0 on the road, 0-2 at home.
Yeah, and this comes on the heels of winning 16 straight regular season games.
That's what I'm saying.
So,
it's amazing.
Hey, so maybe Detroit brings a lot of fans, and they'll think we're on the road, and Dallas will play better.
Of course, Detroit's coming off of a bye. I don't know if that's good or bad. They have rust versus rest. I don't know that there's an exact science or magic formula for that, but it ought to be an entertaining game, and also one that when the schedule first came out, probably nobody would have thought much of a game. But now the Beltway series, Washington and Baltimore, and it was an amazing play if you saw it on Sunday that Lamar Jackson made when he fumbled the ball and had a bingo guy hanging on him and he ran and threw it for a touchdown. But I'm not saying that Jaden Daniels, he is Lamar Jackson, but he is a weapon with his legs as well as with his arm.
Yeah, he surely is. He had 82 yards rushing this past weekend, as well as threw for over 230 yards. Anytime you do that, you're accounting for 300 and some yards of offense by yourself. So, hey, I hate to say this, he's pretty good.
He is pretty good.
Pretty good player.
He is a pretty good player. All right, now it comes down to our barking dogs, and we're going to do some barking. Actually, for the last 2 weeks, Eric, your dogs haven't done some barking, and my dog has. Last week, you had the New York Jets over in London. They came up a little short. Aaron Rodgers threw 3 picks. One was for a touchdown for the other team.
Yeah.
Minnesota wins the game, and my barking dog was Houston, and I was surprised Houston was an underdog at home, and they beat Buffalo. In fact, one of the funniest things, and I don't know if you've got a chance to watch it, but as you watch these games with me, and Houston's got this mascot, and he was all decked out in light blue, and you should see the moves he made when the game-winning field goal went through and Houston won. If you haven't seen it, you need to go back and check that out.
That's one of the funniest things we do on Sunday. We kind of watch that mascot. I think he's the best in the business as far as getting laughs from me, especially from us. We laugh at just about everything.
We laugh at anything. All right, well, we're both 3-2 now. Our barking dogs, and I'll let you go first. Who's your barking dog for this week?
The Jacksonville Jaguars. A team that you touched on. They're on the road at the Chicago Bears.
They're playing that overseas as well.
Yeah, but it's in London. So you see my theme here. It's not really a home team over here. It's just Chicago's own game. But I really think this is another must-win for the Jaguars, and I think they have talent on that roster that just haven't done a lot. And I think it's one of those games where I think the coach is fighting for his to keep his job, and Trevor Lawrence has got all that money in the summertime, and he's fighting, and I just really think they're going to win the game.
All right, well, I was down to 2 barking dogs, and I got to just get it down to 1. I'm thinking the New York Football Giants getting points at home from Cincinnati, so I'm not going to take that one. Here's one I'm going to take, and it's a division game. Anytime you can get a division home dog, the Denver Broncos with their defense is catching 3 at home against the Chargers. I think the Broncos can win that game straight up.
And that's a good choice because the Chargers are banged up across the board. A couple of linemen out. I think their quarterback, Herbert, is battling a high ankle sprain. Yeah, that sounds really good. I think both our dogs might bite this weekend.
Well, I hear them out there kind of whining, so maybe they can get to a growl. Now, what do we have to do? You have to like, subscribe, share, and where do you have to do it at?
You got to go to Wharton Broadcast Network on YouTube.
And we appreciate your attendance, and we'll be talking at you next week.